Exhibit 381 to show you that sometime later, he was running Daniel Rodriguez at 12:40 in the afternoon. Well, it may seem, or it may be, that Daniel Rodriguez was nothing but garbage. It may be that he was somebody who was on methamphetamine. But it was also a true fact that Daniel Rodriguez lay dying in that trailer. And I guess maybe there was another drop of human kindness left in Sergio Villa, who did this courageous act, because what he did is he left. And we don't know why, as indicated in Exhibit 381, what it was that he did in his Tahoe. You were asked over and over, what is it that he needed to do? Why did he leave? Well, take a look at what he did. And remember, this is from his CAT report from his Tahoe that they introduced themselves. 1237, it says, and they even mention it themselves, 998 roll fire, that same time, 1239, one subject has been shot, is down, barely alive, clear GHSE now. House is clear, fire come in, slow it down. Now you know what he was doing. Perhaps just because to them he's a piece of garbage and somebody who's on methamphetamine, he doesn't deserve what the people in Scottsdale do, which is when they're dying, you call the fire department. That's what you do. You do that with people that are alive. You don't just say, come in here and you say, those are throwaways. You know, let's not go ahead and call fire. And let's come in here and point a finger at Sergio Villa and say, well, what is it that he's doing? This person who would not back up, according to them, Richard Chrisman, is the individual who was conscientious throughout this whole thing and was the backup and was the person who was watching and had the courage to stand up and come in and tell you what happened. You were also privy today to a demonstration right here, right about this area here, where there was a piece of wood that was grabbed, or one of the lures had a piece of wood, and they talked about depth of perception. And they talked to you about how it could have appeared as if the defendant never really did place the gun to the left temple of Daniel Rodriguez. And then they argued to you and told you that, well, it could just as well have been that that injury was caused to the left side as Mr. Rodriguez was going down after he had been shot. Because he went down after he was shot. No indications whatsoever that there was any going down in that area. Mr. Rodriguez went down by the couch, went down in these areas here, but never down by that chair. Well then, how is it that they explain to you, again, the flow of blood? You got to look at the forensic evidence, and again, it is a fantasy world that they live in. And they want you to join them in that fantasy world. Take a look at Exhibit 126. We don't need an extra camera to look at that. We don't need extra resolution for you to see. You see that corner? The corner that they told you that he fell and hit his left temple? Well, if he's been shot and he's going down and you've seen all of this blood that he has on him, look at that, everywhere. You look to the right, 158, blood everywhere. Well, it's bloody as you see in Exhibit 94. Take a look at the chair there again. Same condition. How is it then that if he's bleeding and it's coming out, it's only going towards the door area? Because that's when he's going down. And they want you to believe that if he's going down in this position and hits himself on the left side of the head, that's how that was caused. But if that were the case, with all the blood that's coming out there, wouldn't you see some blood there? And wouldn't you see some blood on the carpet right here? Because if he's going down on his left side bleeding, and then of course he's going to have to get up as he's already down, because that's what their scenario requires, that he's going down on his left side like this, bleeding all over the place, although there's no blood there. It's that magical blood again that I talked to you already during my initial closing argument. There's no blood there. They want you to believe that somehow he's going down on his left side, He's already been shot. He's bleeding everywhere. You can see the blood right down here. I'm not anywhere there. It is a physical impossibility for the chair to be in such pristine condition and for them to even argue to you that that's where he got the bruise. Jeffrey Johnson, medical examiner, told you there was a bruise there. And the only way throughout this whole scenario that could have happened, anything that's been presented other than what was just told to you, was that the gun went there. In addition, and that's the left temple, in addition to that, Kathleen Stoller told you that on the muzzle of that gun there was some DNA. Didn't get any reportable results, but there was some DNA there. And the only explanation, if you put the two together, defendant's gun, they may stand up here, do all this demonstration all the time. They can do it all day, but it does not explain the fact there wasn't any blood to the victim's left, and there wasn't any blood on the arm. If he was going down, that would have required him, once he was down here hitting himself, to get up, turn around, and lay down. That didn't happen. They also tell you, well, with regard to the bicycle, this bicycle here on Exhibit 39, you see how it landed on that flower pot they tell you? Look at that. That's indicative of it bouncing up on that. Well, that's what they want you to consider, but there's something they want you to forget. Do you remember when Dominic Barrios, the other police officer, testified? He not only testified about the taser, he not only testified about the tablet, but he also testified about the wheel of the bike. And he said, that's been moved. They want you to believe that that's how it landed, but a police officer with the Phoenix Police Department indicated that's not the position that he saw minutes after he arrived on the scene. So they want you to believe all of that. Even though you live in this fanciful world, even though you believe some people, you don't believe other people, and then you talk about bouncing bicycles when nothing has indicated that. They also talk to you about, well, the left palm of the left area, or palm area, and perhaps the wrist area of the victim that, well, you can see through there if you look really closely that somebody may have checked for a pulse. Seriously, can any of you, if you look at that, you know that at all? Anybody? Yes, there was medical care. Do we really know who actually, anybody touched them there? There was somebody from the fire department that came in there. Do we really know who it was? They want you to believe that it was the defendant. So you're left with these issues, and then then you're confronted with, well, but the key to this whole thing is the taser. The tasers and the confetti that came out of them is really the holy grail to this whole case. They want you to believe that somehow this confetti that came out is the most important thing in the world because, according to Officer Virgilio, he said, I dropped it near the door. He never said inside or outside. He may have been asked, it could have been in the inside, it could have been in the back, but near the door. By the statement that they showed you, that's what he said. It was near the door. We also know with regard to Officer Barrios, he told you that, well, when I got there, the tablet was to the left, the taser was to the right, and it was near the breech of the door, which, again, buttresses what Officer Virgilio said. But then you see later that they switched. How about that? They don't want to talk about a fanciful world. Well, in this real world, things like that, there's no magician that switches things. There's only people that do that. And that was done in this case for a Phoenix police officer that came in and testified. They tell you, well, the aphids, those are the answer. How is it that these three people could have colluded, could have come together to make up this story or grab the aphids and thrown them? The state never said that anybody threw the aphids there. The state indicated to you, for example, that when Myra Hawkins came in and testified, she was, previous to that, she had been in this courtroom when Virgilio testified. She's the individual that told you that some distance away, maybe 6, 8, 9 feet away, and the possibility that that's where she saw the aphids. Well, Officer Virgilio wasn't shooting in that direction. We know he was shooting in this direction because he actually struck Mr. Rodriguez. Additionally, we know that Officer Rudy, who did write a report, who didn't mention these aphids, sort of kind of agreed with her. We're not saying that they threw any aphids there for this detective to pick up. We're just saying that's what they said. Where's the proof? Where is the proof other than their word that those were those aphids were? If we're going to take their word, why don't we take Julia Gia's word then? What makes Julia Gia any better or any worse than theirs? In life, usually, keeping it simple is the best thing. And in this particular case, the simplest answer to this is that nobody threw any aphids out there. Nobody did anything like that. The simplest answer is that those individuals that came in and testified, none of the three wrote it down in their report. They're all Johnny-come-latelys that talk to you about it. And how much trust are you going to have in them, especially since Julia Gia, for example, was removed for saying things to the defendant like, I'm sorry? How about Myra Hawkins when she said, well, yeah, before I came up here, I sort of hugged the defendant's wife. And then you have the other officer whose report is being used to buttress this, being the only person present when somehow the taser and the tablet switched positions. Those are problematic areas for them. And so when you do consider this instruction that is given to you on page number 9 that was shown to you, if you find the state has lost, destroyed, or failed to preserve, are they really out there? Who are you going to believe? If you believe at Gia that they were over here, then you're going to have to disbelieve the other two. These things just don't travel by themselves. And if you believe the other two, then you have to disbelieve at Gia. And if all of that fails, then you have to disbelieve what Barrio said, because he said they were in the doorway, which makes more sense because there was actually a strike to Mr. Rodriguez. So has the state lost, destroyed, or failed to preserve evidence? You have to show that the evidence was there. And do you feel any confidence with those three that those aphids were there, or not? And are its content or quality important to the issues of this case? Stand behind its statements. How important could they possibly be with regard to this case, especially since we know that the taser that was used by Officer Virgilio, if you take a look at Exhibit 163, was fired from on or near who? Right here is this area near the front door. Right here is the glass door that you have. Want to look at Exhibit 165? It's the same thing. There's those aphids there. Well, nobody else was near that front door, whether in or out, at the time that the taser was fired other than Officer Virgilio. So he's the one that fired that. And if you remember, the defendant said he was over here when he fired the taser. Much was made of the fact that, well, Officer Virgilio said that he believed that Chrisman's taser actually struck Mr. Rodriguez. Totally wrong. How could he possibly have been right? Because it was malfunctioning. The taser was malfunctioning. Well, that's true. The taser was malfunctioning. But did Officer Chrisman at that point give the impression that it had struck Daniel Rodriguez? Sure. And how do you know that? Because Jeffrey Johnston told you, the medical examiner. Again, you have to go back to medical science. And you know that because he said on the side of Daniel Rodriguez appears to be injuries consistent with a taser. They forgot about that when they were talking to you about this. Chrisman himself said he went down there at the time after he fired the taser. So if Daniel Rodriguez is down immediately after the taser is fired, who wouldn't think that the taser actually struck him? Who wouldn't think that? Indeed. Chrisman certainly didn't think that. He thought he was down, and he went down there and started to tase him. That's how the offense unfolded. So with the aid, if you will, of Jeffrey Johnston, you again have to rely on his statement going against medical science. It's easy to stand up here and make these grandiose, somewhat out of this world kind of statements, but when you bring them to the light of day, it is clear, as in this case, that they just don't measure up, and you again have to go stretch credulity, and you have to stretch it to the point where it really just doesn't make sense. The other issue that was made much of is that, well, there was this 911 call that was made, and this 911 call indicated 3 times biblical proportions, such as when St. Peter denied Jesus Christ. 1, 2, 3. 3 times she said he was violent. Somehow, because that's sort of 3 times said over and over, that's something that is significant. Well, it is an aspect of the case. But again, if the defendant doesn't know about it, how important is it? How important is it if he doesn't know that that's what she said? And that 911 tape, the officers never heard it. What the officers knew going in, if you take a look at Exhibit 282, this is what they knew. Son Daniel Rodriguez yelled at the complainant, threw something from his room, hit the wall, damaged the wall, complainant calling from the neighbors, lot 50, unknown, drinking and drugs, 2 times dog in the mobile home, loft number 51. That is what they knew. Yes, they want to inflame your passions. They want you to come up to their pulpit. They're hear what they are claiming from their pulpit. They want you to hear that. But unfortunately, the defendant's ears, neither were his nor of Officer Rebuttal, subject to that. How can you say that that formed part of his lexicon of knowledge if he didn't know about it? Same thing with the guns that were found in, not the guns, but the shotgun shells and the rounds that were found in the room. What difference does it make to this inquiry here if he didn't know about it? Then you switch it a little. They say, no, the importance of that was not to show that Richard Chrisman had a fear. No. Shotgun shells, rounds, all that, well, they were not important for that purpose. No. The reason they were important was because we were worried about Elvira Fernandez. That's what his thing is. He was really, really worried about her. Didn't want to leave her there. Because he's such a caring, compassionate individual, right? Except that this caring, compassionate individual that they want to portray to you goes up to her and says, I really can't understand what you're saying. And yes, this one of the witnesses that they called said he was being rude when he was doing this. This person who now wants to say he was so compassionate and just doing his job and cared about her is the same person that was rude to her then. What is the more pristine, if you will, emotion and view of what he was thinking then? When he tells you today, he says, all I did was care about her. That's why I couldn't walk away. Or the person that was seen by a third person being rude and hustling off to the front of that door. He didn't care about her then. It's really unappetizing to think that he wants to feed that to you and says that he cares about her now. That's not what the facts showed then, and that's what's important in this particular case. The other sort of assault in this case was on Sergio Villa. And they went to great lengths to talk about a certain number of areas where they claimed that he was deficient. One of the issues involved the taser, where it fell. And he said it was near the door. And then they showed you the transcript that said that he was asked, well, the taser isn't there now. And he was asked by the prosecutor, could it have been Richard Chrisman who moved it? To his credit, he was honest. He could have said he kicked it. Didn't say that, did he? Didn't point the finger at a time when he could have. He could have taken the shot, but he was honest to the end. And he said, I don't know. I know somebody moved it. I don't know. But he didn't overstep his bounds. The same thing with regard to the issue of the dog. It would have been easy for him to say, walking in, oh yeah, not afraid of the dog at all. But if you remember, he said, context, yes, in the beginning, when you're looking in, you're not sure about what the dogs are going to do. But then once I saw what was going on, no, the dogs were not a threat. No, I was not afraid of the dogs. Yes, in the beginning he was. If you take things out of context, of course, it's going to sound like he's afraid of dogs. And then you have Julia Gia coming in, and there was an issue involving her about whether or not his family member had had a dog do something to them. So, does that mean that he, all of a sudden, just because of that, couldn't go into the trailer? No. And when it's to their benefit that he's in the trailer, of course he's in the trailer. But when it's not to their benefit, he's not in the trailer. When the OC spray is deployed, oh yeah, he's in the trailer then because that's to their benefit. But you know, this guy was chicken. He was scared. But when it's to their benefit, he's inside. And then he had to run away. But when it's not to their benefit, even though when he shoots the taser, oh no, he wasn't inside. You can't have it both ways. Either he was inside or he wasn't inside, and they're not giving the testimony the credit that it deserves. The other issue is involving the telephone call. They brought in Sean Madsen, the union organizer, or whatever it is that he does for the union, working off the taxpayer. One of the things that they said, well, you know, he did have a phone number, and he did have Mr. Madsen's phone number. And he called Mr. Madsen, and he also, there were text messages that were exchanged between them. So, no one ever denied that he had that number. Didn't look at it. He was paying attention when he was doing the call, when he was going to do whatever it was he was going to do. But it could have been his sergeant, and he decided to answer the call, and when it wasn't, he found out. They also said, well, you said that he was inked up. Yeah, that's what he said about Daniel Rodriguez initially. And if you're going to believe him about the fact that Daniel Rodriguez was inked up when he walked in there, perhaps after the gun had been pointed at him, then why wouldn't you believe Sergio Villa when he says, but that changed. That changed because I started to talk to him. And when I started to talk to him, that's when he came down. That's when he was going to leave. You can't have it both ways where you choose to believe in one time and not another time. It's a consistency thing here. The issue also was who arrived first. Well, who did arrive first? Well, according to Sergio Villa, they arrived about the same time. And his cop was parked there first, which indicates that he was there first. They want you to say, well, no, you know, he just was going back and forth with regard to that issue. No, he wasn't going back and forth with regard to that issue. He was always consistent about it. The other thing they said, and which is really sort of at the crux of their argument, the real argument is that they want to show motive. They want to show that there's a reason why Virgil would come forth with the story. They said something to the effect of, well, if it got out that he wasn't an effective cover person, and the words were something to the effect of, who would work with him at that point? Well, let's turn the coin to the other side. If he's the person who's come forward and said this, and he has had, for example, visits from Tom Madsen to bring over this clipboard, and all of this has taken place, you think that anybody wants to work with him now? What benefit have they shown that he has received? You think people are lining up to work with Officer Sergio Villa? Do you really think that that's what's going on? Oh, they said he was afraid that people wouldn't work with him before. He could have, at any point in the last year, said, you know, I was mistaken. I really was. Thinking about it, I was mistaken. As you can see from everything that he did, he's an individual that has courage and has stood up for all of what he believed from then until now. Well, other things that they talked to you about was, well, and most of it had to do with the aphids, but what about the expert witnesses? They talked to you about Usha Haig, and he was asked about slitting and stippling. As you now know, there's a difference between studying and stippling. Studying is the 364. Little puffs of smoke that come out. Stippling are these. And he was asked a compound question about the sooting and the stippling, and they're saying, see, he doesn't even know the difference between sooting and stippling. And so you shouldn't believe a single solitary thing he has to say, even though the expert that they want you to believe, Vincent DeMaio, says that he's the preeminent expert in the United States in shooting and reconstructions, shooting reconstructions. The other thing with regard to Vincent DeMaio, one of the things that they omitted to tell you when they told you to sort of take in and believe everything he has to say and have you disregard what's in the wall. He told you in response to a jury question that, well, when the bullet travels through the body, it pretty much keeps a straight line. Even though it may start to tumble, the bullet, when it goes in, it still has a straight line. If it does have a straight line, then it can go out in the trajectory that it was fired. And that makes the ending point something important to measure. They did end their presentation by talking to you about the charges in this particular case, and they did make reference to the jury instruction. They told you that there was no aggravated assault here. And they told you that there was no aggravated assault here because, piece number 6, the defendant intentionally placed another person in reasonable apprehension of immediate physical injury. And that even though Sergio Villa said shock really doesn't translate or isn't reasonable apprehension. Isn't that just another name for it? But it isn't. And again, they want you to believe Sergio Villa when it's to their benefit or perceived benefit, but not when it hurts them. But it's not Sergio Villa's view that matters. It's your view of the circumstances and the case involving a situation where a gun is used and placed on somebody's head. Well, no one can debate that that certainly would be a shocking event. It would be a concerning event, and that's what reasonable apprehension is. And yes, that is met here because the defendant did use a handgun. In terms of the charge involving the cruelty to animals, clearly there, prove that the defendant intentionally or knowingly killed Junior in the care and custody of, obviously it was the victim, without legal privilege or consent of the owner. You're saying, well, he had legal privilege to do that. What kind of legal privilege is that? The only people really that have a legal privilege, again, are those, for example, with the animal societies that can come out there. There is an issue, was that in self-defense? They didn't raise it to you. Was that in self-defense? It wasn't in self-defense because the dog was far away, was never a threat, and the second shot was taken and hitting the dog in the back. And he would continue shooting the dog had he been in self-defense. And lastly, the other question, jury instruction that they talked to you. sort of sandblasting effect on there? No, you're not going to see that. It is a nonsensical story that they have brought forth for you to consider in the hopes that someone, maybe one of you, will say maybe, if we start talking, and there's no basis for the talking, or no reason for them to actually believe this, then somebody might think that this is a situation that deserves a not guilty verdict. And they do things that, even though the jury instructions tell you you are not to decide on sympathy, they walk over to where Richard Chrisman is, and they begin to talk about some of his attributes. Again, trying to talk about sympathy. And they try to talk to you and saying, it's his life. I want you to be careful with it. Well, I'm asking you to exercise more care in rendering this verdict of guilty than the care he showed for the life of another individual, Daniel Rodriguez. John Donne said it best, and I know I'm going to be putting some of the words to apply to this case, but when he wrote, every person's death diminishes. So therefore, send no one to find for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Many people attribute that to Ernest Hemingway. It was actually John Donne who wrote that first. And with regard to this particular case, if we're going to use that analogy, the bell has rung on 2 occasions. It's certainly rung for Sergio Villa. And he answered that bell. He did not sweep this under the rug, even though there is a whole department that's involved, the City of Phoenix Police Department. He stood up, he was counted, and he had the courage to say, this is what I saw. Do with it what you will. And he came in and he testified. That same bell now rings for you. And all I'm asking you is to apply the facts that are in this case, absolutely without a shadow of a doubt, so that this individual committed these crimes that he's charged with. I'm asking that you return a verdict of guilty, because the law tells you that that's what you should do based on these facts. Thank you.
You go to page 9, finish up with